At my wedding, my sister stood up and said, "Before you say I do, I'm pregnant and it's your groom's baby." The crowd gasped. I froze. Then my 9-year-old nephew stood up and said, "That's a lie. I can prove it." You know how some moments are supposed to be perfect? How you plan every detail, rehearse every step, imagine every smile. That was my wedding morning. The old stone church smelled like lilies and centuries of prayers. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in the silence, the soft whisper of my dress against the marble floor. My father squeezed my hand, his weathered fingers trembling slightly. "You look radiant, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Ryan stood at the altar, his eyes locked on mine, that crooked smile I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago spreading across his face. Everything was exactly as I'd dreamed it would be. The organ began its processional hymn, and I took my first step down that endless aisle, past familiar faces beaming with joy, past my mother dabbing tears with her lace handkerchief, past my best friends from college clutching each other's hands in excitement. This was it. This was my moment. My perfect, beautiful, once-in-a-lifetime moment. Then Amelia stood up. My sister. My maid of honor. The woman who'd helped me pick out this dress, who'd thrown my bachelorette party, who'd held my hair back when I was sick with nerves the night before. She stood up in the middle of the ceremony, calm as death, precise as a surgeon's blade. Her voice cut through the organ music like ice through silk. "Before you say I do," she announced, her words carrying to every corner of that sacred space, "I'm pregnant, and it's Ryan's baby." The silence that followed was deafening. Not the peaceful quiet of a church, but the terrible, suffocating silence of a world ending. I felt the blood drain from my face, felt my knees threaten to buckle beneath me. My bouquet of white roses trembled in my hands, petals scattering like broken promises onto the cold stone floor. The organ wheezed to a stop mid-note. Someone in the back dropped their hymnal with a thunderous crash that echoed through the nave like gunfire. If you were standing there with me, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every one of them. And if you're still with me so far, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happened next, because it only got wilder. My mother's face contorted in horror, her hand flying to her mouth as if she could somehow push the words back into the air, make them unsaid. My father's grip on my arm tightened so hard I could feel his fingers through the silk of my sleeve. His face had gone ashen, his proud smile crumbling into confused devastation. Ryan stood frozen at the altar, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, his face cycling through confusion, shock, and something that looked terrifyingly like guilt. The pastor's holy book slipped from his hands, hitting the marble with a sound like thunder. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not on the day that was supposed to be the beginning of my happily ever after. But Amelia just stood there, serene and satisfied, watching my world burn with that same calm expression she'd worn when we were children, and she'd broken my favorite toy. The congregation erupted in whispers, gasps, and shocked exclamations. 200 people witnessing my humiliation, my devastation, the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my life. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to wake up from this nightmare and find myself safe in my childhood bedroom, with my mother bringing me hot chocolate and telling me it was all just a bad dream. But I couldn't move. I stood there in my $1,000 dress, trembling like a leaf in a hurricane, while my sister's words echoed endlessly in my mind. Then, cutting through the chaos like a sword through smoke, a small voice piped up from the third row. "That's a lie. I can prove it. Dylan, my 9-year-old nephew, Amelia's own son." He stood up in his little navy suit, his dinosaur sticker-covered tablet clutched in his small hands. His voice was steady, clear, carrying the kind of moral certainty that only children possess. In that moment, he looked older than his years, wiser than the adults around him who had created this mess. The church fell silent again, but this time it was different. This time it was the silence of anticipation, of a story taking an unexpected turn. Dylan walked to the center aisle with the confidence of someone who knows they're about to change everything. He held up his tablet, its screen glowing like a beacon of truth in the dim light of the church. "I recorded Mommy on the phone last week," he said, his young voice carrying to every corner of the sanctuary. "She was talking to someone about lying at the wedding. She was practicing what to say." Amelia's face went white as bone. The smug satisfaction melted away, replaced by pure, naked panic. She reached for her son, but he stepped back, still holding that tablet like a shield of righteousness. The video began to play, tinny sound echoing through the church's sound system that Dylan had somehow managed to connect to. There was Amelia, clear as day, pacing around her living room with her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice filled the sacred space, casual and cruel in a way that made my stomach turn. "The timing has to be perfect," she was saying on the recording, her tone light and conversational, as if she were discussing weekend plans instead of destroying her sister's life. "Right after the 'speak now or forever, hold your peace' part, but before the vows. Maximum impact, you know? I've been practicing in the mirror." She laughed, actually laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I even bought a fake pregnancy test and doctored some ultrasound photos I found online. The whole thing will look so convincing." The voice on the other end was muffled, but Amelia's responses painted a clear picture of conspiracy. "Don't worry about proof," she continued on the recording. "By the time anyone thinks to ask for it, the damage will be done. The wedding will be ruined, she'll be humiliated, and everyone will remember this day for all the wrong reasons. She's always been the golden child, the perfect one. Well, let's see how perfect she looks when her groom abandons her at the altar." The tablet showed Amelia holding up a box of pregnancy tests, grinning at her reflection as she practiced her announcement. "Before you say I do," she rehearsed, gesturing dramatically, "I'm pregnant and it's your groom's baby." She burst into laughter, clapping her hands together like she'd just delivered the punchline to the world's cruelest joke. But the worst part, the part that made me physically sick, was what came next. The recording showed Amelia's face growing serious as she listened to whoever was on the other end of the call. "I know it's harsh," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "but you're paying me enough to make it worth it. Besides, she's had everything handed to her whole life. It's time she learned what real disappointment feels like." The church erupted, not in whispers this time, but in full-throated outrage. My mother shot up from her seat like a woman possessed, her face twisted with fury and heartbreak. She moved down the aisle with purpose, her heels clicking against the stone like hammer blows. When she reached Amelia, she didn't hesitate. Her hand connected with Amelia's cheek with a sound that echoed through the nave like a gunshot. "You are not my daughter," my mother said, her voice shaking with rage and betrayal. "Not anymore. Not after this." Tears streamed down her face, but her voice never wavered. "How could you do this to your own sister? How could you use your own child in this sick game?" Amelia stumbled backward, her hand pressed to her reddening cheek, her carefully constructed facade finally cracking. "Mom, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," my father interrupted, his voice like thunder rolling across mountains. He'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes, but his moral authority filled the space around him. "You took money to destroy your sister's wedding. You involved your own son in your lies. You are no child of mine." Ryan, meanwhile, had found his voice. "I never touched her," he said, his words carrying clearly through the church. "I swear on my mother's grave, I have never been unfaithful to you. Amelia is lying about everything." His face was pale but determined, his eyes locked on mine with desperate sincerity. But Amelia wasn't done. Even caught red-handed, even exposed in front of everyone she'd ever known, she tried to salvage her lies. "The recording is fake," she insisted, her voice rising to a near shriek. "He forced me to make it. He threatened me." Little Dylan, still standing in the aisle with his tablet, looked up at his mother with eyes far too old for his 9 years. "No, Mommy," he said quietly. "You made me promise not to tell anyone. You said it was our secret game, but games aren't supposed to hurt people." That's when Amelia finally broke. The mask slipped completely, and what was underneath was ugly and twisted and filled with years of accumulated resentment. She looked at me with pure hatred, all pretense of sisterly love finally abandoned. "Fine," she screamed, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Fine, I did it. Are you happy now? Yes, I took the money. Yes, I planned the whole thing. And you know what? I'm not sorry. I'm sick of watching you get everything while I get nothing. The perfect job, the perfect man, the perfect life. Well, now your perfect wedding is ruined too." She pushed past my mother, past my father, past everyone who had once loved her, and ran down the aisle toward the church doors. Her heels echoed like gunshots against the stone, and then she was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her perfume and the wreckage of our family. I stood there in my wedding dress, surrounded by the scattered pieces of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and felt completely numb. 200 people stared at me with mixtures of pity, shock, and curiosity. My perfect wedding had become a spectacle, a story they'd tell for years to come. But all I could think about was how quiet it had become, how the silence seemed to press against my eardrums like water. That's when my cousin Sarah appeared at my elbow, her phone in her hand and her face pale with concern. "Honey," she whispered, "you need to see this." Amelia went live on Instagram the moment she left the church. The video already has 3 million views. 3 million strangers watching my humiliation. 3 million people who now knew my sister had taken money to destroy my wedding. The story was spreading across social media like wildfire, jumping from platform to platform, growing and mutating with each share. Wedding betrayal was already trending, and screenshots of Amelia's livestream were being dissected and analyzed by people who had never heard my name an hour ago. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. Friend requests, interview requests, people offering to sell their stories to tabloids. The sacred space of my wedding had become content, entertainment for the masses. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. Instead, I gathered up my skirts and walked to the bridal room on unsteady legs, my family trailing behind me like mourners at a funeral. But in that small, quiet room, filled with the remnants of my getting ready ritual, hairpins scattered on the vanity, lipstick tubes and tissues, the champagne we'd planned to toast with after the ceremony, something shifted inside me. The numbness began to fade, replaced by something harder, colder, more purposeful. I looked around at the faces surrounding me, my parents, devastated but rallying to my side. Ryan, pale but resolute, still wearing his boutonniere like a badge of commitment. My brother-in-law Frank, Amelia's ex-husband, who looked both furious and unsurprised. My best friend Monica, who worked in PR and was already pulling out her phone with the look of someone planning war. "I'm not going to be a victim," I said, my voice steady for the first time since Amelia had stood up. "She wanted to make a spectacle of me? Fine, but she's going to live with the consequences of what she's done." That's when I decided I wasn't just going to cry about it. I was going to fight smart. If you love seeing women stand back up stronger, take a second to subscribe, because I promise, what came next was pure karma in motion. And hey, drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how far our little community reaches. Frank cleared his throat. "I have more recordings," he said quietly. "Amelia has been planning this for months. She's been documenting everything, thinking she was so clever. Phone calls, text messages, even videos of her practicing her speech. She kept it all." Monica looked up from her phone, her publicist instincts fully engaged. "We can control this narrative," she said. "Right now, you're the victim everyone's sympathizing with. But if we play this right, if we're strategic about what information comes out when, we can turn this into something bigger. We can make sure Amelia faces real consequences for what she's done." And so we planned. Right there in the bridal room, surrounded by the wreckage of my wedding day, we planned Amelia's downfall with the precision of a military campaign. We would release information slowly, methodically, building a case not just in the court of public opinion, but in actual legal proceedings. We would make sure that everyone who had watched my humiliation would also watch Amelia face the consequences of her actions. The website went live 3 days later. 1 video per day, each one revealing another layer of Amelia's deception. The planning, the rehearsing, the fake evidence she'd created. By the end of the week, major news outlets were picking up the story. Amelia lost her job at the marketing firm, where she'd worked for 5 years. Her landlord started eviction proceedings. Her social media accounts were flooded with such vitriol that she had to delete them entirely. But the legal consequences were what really mattered. Frank filed for full custody of Dylan, using the recordings as evidence of Amelia's manipulation and willingness to involve their son in her schemes. I pressed charges for defamation and emotional distress. Ryan's lawyer got involved when it became clear that Amelia's false accusations could have damaged his medical practice. The custody hearing was swift and decisive. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who had clearly seen her share of family dysfunction, listened to the recordings with a face like stone. When Amelia tried to claim that she'd been coerced, that she was the real victim, the judge cut her off. "Ms. Peterson," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "you deliberately involved your minor child in a scheme to defame your sister and her fiancé. You coached him to lie, you used him as a prop in your deception, and when he chose to tell the truth, you abandoned him in a church full of strangers. Your visitation will be supervised, and I strongly recommend you seek professional help before you do any more damage to this child." Dylan came to live with us while Frank got back on his feet. Having him in the house was bittersweet, a constant reminder of what Amelia had done, but also a glimpse of the innocent victim in all of this. He was quiet at first, careful, as if he expected punishment for telling the truth. But gradually, as the weeks passed, he began to relax. He did his homework at our kitchen table, helped Ryan with weekend projects, fell asleep on our couch during movie nights. I thought the worst was over. Amelia was facing consequences. Dylan was safe, and Ryan and I had managed to salvage our relationship from the wreckage of that terrible day. We even started planning a small private ceremony, just immediate family and close friends, a quiet celebration to replace the spectacle that our wedding had become. Then Frank called with news that changed everything again. Subscribe if you're curious how it all ended, and tell me your country below. "Dylan's been having nightmares," he said, his voice tight with concern. "He keeps talking about a man who came to the house with an envelope. He said Amelia told him it was their special secret, but he's been remembering more details. He said the man was fancy, with a nice car, and he gave Amelia a lot of money. The final piece of the puzzle. We'd known Amelia had been paid, but we'd assumed it was some bitter ex-boyfriend, or maybe someone with a grudge against Ryan. We never imagined it went deeper than that. The investigation Frank and I conducted was meticulous and heartbreaking. Phone records showed months of calls between Amelia and a number registered to a law firm. Bank records revealed a series of cash deposits, always in amounts just under the reporting threshold. But it was the recorded phone calls that Frank found hidden in Amelia's apartment that finally revealed the truth. Amelia had been working with Ryan's mother. Jessica Whitmore had never approved of me. In her eyes, I wasn't good enough for her precious son. Too common, too ordinary, too middle class for the Whitmore family name. She'd tried subtle sabotage at first, comments about my job, my family, my modest background. When that didn't work, when Ryan proposed anyway, she'd escalated. The recordings were damning. Jessica's crisp, patrician voice giving Amelia instructions, promising her increasing amounts of money for increasingly destructive acts. It had started small. Amelia was supposed to cause drama at the engagement party, maybe spill wine on my dress or start an argument. But when those attempts failed to break us up, Jessica had proposed the nuclear option. "The wedding announcement will destroy her," Jessica said on one recording, her voice as cold and calculated as a surgeon planning an amputation. "No one will ever forget this humiliation. Ryan will be so embarrassed, so traumatized by the public scene, that he'll never be able to look at her without remembering this moment. It will poison their relationship from the inside out." But Amelia, it turned out, had been recording everything. Not out of any moral qualms, but as insurance, leverage for the future. She documented every payment, every instruction, every cruel calculation. And when she realized that she was going to take the fall alone, when she saw that Jessica was going to escape consequences while she lost her job, her home, and her son, Amelia decided to take her down too. The meeting happened at a neutral coffee shop downtown. Amelia looked terrible, thin, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that hung loose on her shrinking frame. The viral notoriety had taken its toll. She couldn't go anywhere without being recognized, couldn't find work, couldn't rebuild her life while the internet kept her sins on permanent display. "I want to make this right," she said, though her eyes told a different story. This wasn't about redemption, it was about revenge. Jessica threw me away the moment things got complicated. She's been living her perfect life while I lost everything. It's time she faced some consequences, too. She slid a flash drive across the table. Everything's on there. Phone calls, text messages, bank transfer confirmations, even videos of our meetings. She was so paranoid about being overheard that she insisted on meeting in person half the time. I recorded it all. The press conference was scheduled for the following week. Ryan and I sat behind a table laden with microphones while our lawyer presented the evidence methodically, piece by piece. The room was packed with reporters, camera crews, and curious onlookers. When the recording of Jessica's voice played through the speakers, admitting to orchestrating the entire plot, the reaction was immediate and visceral. "I simply will not have that woman as part of this family," Jessica's recorded voice declared with icy certainty. "If Ryan won't see reason, then we'll have to help him see it. The wedding needs to be destroyed in such a public, humiliating way that he'll never be able to forgive her for subjecting him to that embarrassment." The social consequences for Jessica were swift and merciless. Her charity board positions evaporated overnight. Her country club membership was quietly revoked. The society pages that had once featured her elegant dinner parties and philanthropic events now dissected her downfall with the same gleeful attention they'd once paid to her successes. But beyond the public humiliation, beyond the legal consequences and the social exile, something more important had happened. The truth was, finally, completely out. The conspiracy that had almost destroyed my life was exposed in all its calculated cruelty. Ryan and I were free to move forward without the shadow of doubt that Jessica had tried so hard to cast over our relationship. The second wedding was everything the first one should have been. Small, intimate, filled with people who truly loved and supported us. Dylan was our ring bearer, proud and serious in his new suit, carefully carrying the symbol of the commitment that his bravery had helped to save. My parents cried happy tears instead of shocked ones. Ryan's vows were even more heartfelt for having been tested by fire. But the real victory wasn't the wedding itself. It was the quiet moments that came after. Sunday morning breakfast with Dylan chattering about his soccer games. Ryan teaching him to ride a bike in our driveway. Family dinners where we talked about ordinary things, homework and grocery lists and weekend plans. Normal, peaceful, unglamorous life that no one could sabotage or destroy or turn into entertainment. Amelia eventually moved across the country, trying to escape the notoriety that followed her everywhere. Jessica retreated to her estate, a shadow of her former imperious self. The internet moved on to newer scandals, fresher outrage. But we remained, building something real and lasting from the ashes of that terrible day. The real revenge, I realized, wasn't the public humiliation or the legal consequences or the social exile. The real revenge was building a life they couldn't touch. A marriage based on truth instead of deception. A family built on love instead of manipulation. A happiness so genuine and complete that no amount of plotting or scheming could diminish it. That's what victory actually looks like. Not the dramatic confrontation or the satisfying downfall of your enemies, but the quiet triumph of choosing love over bitterness, truth over revenge, healing over hatred. Amelia tried to destroy my wedding day, but she ended up giving me something far more valuable. Absolute certainty about who Ryan was, who I was, and what we meant to each other. If you thought that was wild, hit subscribe. We have more true life stories that will shock you. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if this happened at your wedding? And let me know which country you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers all around the world.